Visiting a city maybe for the second time and don't want to visit the same tourist traps? Check out Top Dog Tours. We have lots of different options for walking tours of neighborhoods and attractions that everybody will love. We are in Boston, Philadelphia, Toronto, and New York City. You can visit us at topdogtours.com and check us out on social media for offers and discounts. Hi, I'm Nicole Kelly, and this is She Brew in the City. And today I'm talking to Dr. Beth Ricanati. How are you doing today, Doctor?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to talk to you because we're talking about one of my favorite subjects for a decent portion of your interview, I think. Challah. I love challah. We have this thing in our house that somehow, I don't know who created it. I think it was my husband, the Challah Monster. My daughter, we've created this kind of mythical character that comes and steals your challah, and she pretends to be scared of it, and it's very cute. But she gets challah sent home every Friday from school because I'm not a baker, so I'm very thankful for that. But we're gonna talk a lot about challah today.
Fabulous. Thank you. I share a love of it as well.
So I usually start off by asking my guests where they're from, what their Jewish upbringing was like. For my female guests, if they had a bat mitzvah, what that was like. So let's dive in.
Absolutely. I am from Cleveland, Ohio. I now live on the West Coast, but I am a Midwesterner. I grew up very Reform. I am now solidly conservative. It's been a journey, continues to be a journey. I didn't know that people made challah growing up. I thought it came in the plastic bag from the Jewish bakery you had a couple times a year. And I did not have a bar mitzvah, unfortunately. All of my kids have been bar and bar mitzvahed. I did attend Sunday school through ninth grade. I had a confirmation, is what they called it back then. I don't know if they even still do that in Reform synagogues. But that was the extent then of my Jewish education. And it wasn't until I went off to college that I really started to learn more.
So they do still have confirmation because we're members of a Reform synagogue. And what ours does is pretty cool is the culmination of it is they take a trip to Germany and specifically Berlin.
Oh my gosh.
Because that's really where the Reform movement started. So I'm hoping when my daughter is older, she's only 3, so we've got
beautiful.
Some time. Yeah. Though with what I'm about to go into, I'm sure she's going to spend a lot of time in Germany. I'm about to embark on a graduate program in Holocaust and genocide studies. So I'm sure she'll end up in Germany
really
at some
powerful.
point before 10th grade. Yeah, I'm very excited and what I'll be able to do with the degree, but I'm a little overwhelmed.
Understandably.
Yeah. So you made the transition from being Reformed to conservative. Usually it's the other way around, which is the journey that I made because I grew up in a conservative synagogue, though I feel like my personal family was leaning more towards Reform than conservative. Like we didn't keep kosher. You know, we went to the required Shabbats through Hebrew school, but not like extra holidays. Like I feel like I celebrate more holidays now than when I was a kid. I go to like everything.
Yeah.
So what caused that transition, and what was that transition like, and what did that entail for you and your family?
Oh, it's been absolutely wonderful. So I married a man who grew up, I would say, conservadox, really more conservative, but more on the observant side of conservative. And I like to joke that when we got married, it was a mixed marriage because it really felt that way. We were bringing two wildly different backgrounds together. And in the beginning, we were members of a Reform synagogue, and we did not keep kosher. He grew up keeping kosher. And then we had kids. And that changed everything for us. We began a journey when we had kids that continues to this day, where we have just been embracing more and more of our tradition and religion and background and heritage. And we studied with more observant rabbis once the kids were born, and ultimately did join a conservative synagogue and sent the kids to summer camp, Jewish summer camp, overnight camp. And I really came to hold on to Jewish ideas and thoughts as a tool for parenting. And that's really where it became really helpful. Like when the kids were little, I mean, now they're in college and beyond, but when they were really like your daughter's age, but when they were, sort of preschool-ish, I began to see the merits of a lot of Jewish teaching as a wonderful guide for parenting. And it was such an easy path then to embrace. And I've come to really love it. And that's where we are today. And we do keep kosher-ish now. And
Kosher-ish.
We separate milk and meat, and we don't have, we don't eat pork or shellfish. Except I must admit, when I travel, sometimes I have a little linguine and clams, but we won't talk about that.
I've heard this referred to as kosher style. If you're not keeping like strict laws of kosher style.
Right. So we have separate dishes and that, but right. I don't have two sinks and two dishwashers.
Yes. And some people have special Passover kitchens, which I've seen in some houses, which is extra next level, that they only use it during Passover.
Wow. No, I don't have an extra kitchen.
It requires a lot of space. I feel like, being a New Yorker, I'm impressed that people can have room for two sets of dishes. And
yes,
a dishwasher period. That's always, like we just moved into an apartment that has a washer and dryer. So I feel like I've reached the pinnacle of New York living. Yes. Like our initial apartment we were in for 8 years, and we had a little countertop dishwasher, and then our next place had a real dishwasher and laundry in the building, and now we have everything. So I feel like I've made it, which is a weird like milestone for New Yorkers. So I read that you majored in art history in undergraduate and for your undergraduate degree, and then you decided to pursue medicine. That's a pretty extreme shift. What caused that?
It is a pivot, but I have to say, by way of background, studying art to become a physician, I think should be a requirement for everybody, because I spent 4 years learning how to look, how to see. And then it became very easy when it was time to, when we were in medical school. All of my clinical work in medical school went very, very well because I knew how to look and how to see in a really different way than my biology and chemistry major colleagues or co-students. The pivot became apparent, though, in college, because I was at school on the East Coast, having grown up in Cleveland, as I mentioned, and it was the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and I became aware of some women's health issues that there were Supreme Court cases and things like that. And I had not known about any of this growing up in Ohio. And I wanted to do something about it. And I wanted to try and affect some change. And I have always thought that if you're going to try and change something, you have to actually get in there and change it. So I thought if I had an MD, I could probably have a more of a leg to stand on in women's health than not. And I actually had always spent my whole childhood in one way or another helping other people. I learned Braille as a child and volunteered at the Sight Center in Cleveland, which is an organization for the visually impaired and blind, and actually wrote with Stouffer's Food, wrote a cookbook for the blind in high school. And I always worked and volunteered in hospitals. So it was no surprise in hindsight, but hindsight is always 20/20. And if you had told me when I entered college and I went in with the idea of majoring in art history, which is sort of interesting to go in with the same major that one goes out with. But anyway, if you had told me then that I would be a science geek, I would not have known who you were talking about. But it's been a great combination, I think. And also then it made it really easy, as I know we'll get into later, but I pivoted yet again. And so the stage was set early on that I was obviously going to be doing lots of different things that were outside of the box.
One has to expect the unexpected when it comes to careers.
Yes, indeed.
I feel the same way. We moved to New York to pursue musical theater, and now I'm going to be studying the Holocaust. So very, very, very different. But again, looking back, a lot of it makes sense and no one seems surprised.
Yes.
And I've also heard that a lot of medical schools, they like students who aren't necessarily pre-med because it brings a well-rounded doctor out of the program. So if you're interested in going to medical school, maybe you can minor in something sciencey and major in history or art or something.
I think it's a great idea. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah,
I definitely think it matters.
You're going to get a lot of that chemistry in med school and stuff anyway.
Oh.
So it's not like you're going to miss out on it.
No.
So after medical school, you worked at the Cleveland Clinic and you co-created something called Lifestyle 180. What is that?
Yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit about how that came about?
Sure. So actually at first, I was in New York as well, and I totally respect the small apartment. We did not have laundry in our apartment, so I'm right there with you. But I went in, as I had mentioned before, with an interest in women's health. So I went to med school with that as a focus, and I trained at Columbia, actually in New York, and practiced in their women's health center for a couple of years. And then when we moved back home to Cleveland, I started at the Cleveland Clinic in their women's health center. I'm an internist by training, just to give background. So I take care of adults. And after I had been in the women's health center for about 5 years at the Cleveland Clinic, they had a new department called the Wellness Institute that they were setting up and establishing. And within that, they wanted to create a program to treat chronic disease through lifestyle. So think food, exercise, and stress management. And those were things that I was becoming increasingly more passionate about, because no matter how many women I saw a day in my clinic, invariably, we always were talking about, did you eat breakfast? And how are you managing your stress? Have you moved today? I mean, I was having the same conversation again and again and again. So the idea that I could be involved on a larger scale and have greater impact was extremely exciting to me. And I also really believe in the power of lifestyle modification to treat and to prevent disease. And obviously, the good news is that now it's 15 years later, it's certainly more mainstream. Then I felt like some people thought I was crazy, but we did incredible work. So Lifestyle 180 was a program that was set up to take patients who had what I like to think of as low-hanging fruit. So heart disease and high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, obesity, even some cancers, and put them through a program where it was a 6-week program. They came twice a week and had nutrition, exercise, and stress management classes. We measured everything. We measured labs. We knew about their medications. All of their biometrics, so their blood pressure and their heart rate and their weight. And we also measured behavioral. We looked at different scales, like how stressed were they, and it was so exciting to see over that 6 weeks. And then we followed them actually for a year. So the program in its total was a year, and we were ecstatic because it worked. I mean, people they felt better, which was so exciting to me, and they were able to move the needle on all of it. So people who were on medicine were able to lower their medicine and sometimes even come off of their medicine, which was really cool. They improved all of their lab functions. So if they had high cholesterol, it got better. If their hemoglobin A1C, which is a marker for diabetes, was elevated, it went down. Their weight went down, their blood pressure went down. It was really, really gratifying to see that, yes, you can change what you eat. You can think about how you're going to move. You can think about how you're going to manage your stress, and you can therefore have a really positive impact. We know, Nicole, that 75, 80%, depending which study you want to look at, of chronic diseases are impacted by lifestyle. That is a huge number, which I find really exciting because it means that we have so much control no matter what's going on in the world. And God knows this year, there's a lot going on in the world.
Yes.
But we still can stop. And in my case, make challah, which we'll talk about, but we can stop and think every day how we're going to impact our own health, which therefore, of course, impacts everybody around us. it have a huge ripple effect.
Yes, I am a type 2 diabetic, and I feel like I'm constantly thinking about food and have many, many thoughts on that, but that's another podcast completely.
But I'd like to talk about that too. So someday.
yes. We can definitely, we will revisit. We'll just talk about food, which, for good or for better or for worse, I love food. So at some point you then ended up moving to Southern California. What caused that move? Moving from Ohio to California is a pretty big difference.
It was a big difference, and it happened really quickly. My husband had a job opportunity, and I was so excited to try something new. We've moved a lot, and I love that personally. And the kids were the right age. I didn't want to leave when they were in high school, that they were younger then. I thought it would be easier to move at a younger age. Mm-hmm. And what a treat to come to a completely new environment. I have to say the weather here is lovely. Being in Cleveland, my husband called me one day at work about the opportunity, and it was wintertime in Cleveland, and it was great from the grounds to the heavens. And gosh, I really don't miss that, quite frankly. So, yeah. So here we are.
I'm originally from Southern California, so I understand, but I made the opposite move, and I feel like I'm never leaving here. Despite the terrible weather, I feel like I'm much more of a New York City girl than a SoCal girl. But a lot of my friends and family are very Southern California, and they're never going to leave. So I definitely respect that. So let's jump into what I really want to talk about is your book called Braided Journey of 1,000 Challahs. How did that happen? I want the whole story. Did you start baking challah and then write a book? Had you been baking challah already? I want the whole spiel.
We moved, love to tell it. We moved back to Ohio from New York, and I was working at the Cleveland Clinic. And I am sure in hindsight, Nicole, that I had physician burnout, but so now imagine this is 15 years ago. That was not a common moniker in our vocabulary. And I certainly didn't know how to talk about it. And nobody around me was talking about it. To say I was stressed out would be an understatement. We had 3 little kids. Both of our families were there. I was trying to be present mom and a present family member and a wife and a spouse and friend, all these things, and go to work. It was hard for me. I really struggled. And about this time, during the Jewish New Year, a girlfriend of mine from my New York days called, and we were chatting. She was wishing me Happy New Year, asking me what I was doing with the kids. You're so cute. Like, I can barely brush my teeth these days and get out the door in the morning. I'm not doing it. I don't know what we're doing. And she said, oh, you should make challah. I just came from a mommy and me class at the JCC on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It's super easy. I was like, yeah, right. Back to the comment I made earlier, I had no idea people actually made challah. And I'd certainly never worked with yeast. So the idea that I was going to bake something was almost laughable. But she kept talking about it, and it really did sound cool, for lack of a better description. And so I tried it that week. And I have to say, Nicole, it changed my life. I stood at the kitchen counter in Cleveland. I was home alone, and I just had my hands in a bowl of dough trying to make challah. I was not on my beeper. I wasn't answering a page. I wasn't worrying about a patient, and I wasn't worrying about my kids. I just was trying to mix flour and sugar in a bowl. And then the crazy thing, so I'd never baked bread, so I didn't understand what was going to happen when you actually bake bread, which is your house becomes a home. That smell, that aroma, it's magical. And there I was, a couple hours later, enveloped in the smell. And I took those lopsided loaves out of the oven. I'm better now at braiding. And they looked real, like I had made something. And my kids were so excited. And my husband, who obviously appreciated the tradition a lot more than I did at that time, was incredulous. And it was so cool. I did it again the next week. And before I knew it, Nicole, I was trying to find a half an hour every Friday to make the dough. And I did, for years. And I ultimately realized I had learned a lot of really important life lessons. At this point, we were now living in LA. And I thought, okay, I'm clearly not the only stressed out mom on the block. And I've learned a lot from this ritual. I want to share that. And that's what became the genesis for the book. And the book came out in the end of 2018. And since then, it's just had this incredible life of its own. And I've been able to share it with people all over the country. I now lead workshops. The great news is we're back in person. It started virtually during COVID.
Yeah.
But I now get to travel and make challah with people and to do, I'm a physician, right? I'm not a baker. So I talk about this and I think about it, and I write about it with that as my lens, where I'm taking this ancient Jewish ritual, which is so powerful, and I'm overlaying it with these ideas and thoughts that I've learned as a physician. I talk about the importance of mindfulness and being present and managing our stress and why building community is so important to us. And I've found that the more I do this, the more I realize exactly how important it is to do this. It's been a very easy pivot for me.
That's very different than working in women's health, but very, but helpful in a very different way.
Right.
Yeah. No,
right.
I see the connection, but yes, I feel like we were saying, it's one of those things that if you had probably told yourself you were going to be doing challah workshops, you would have thought you were crazy. So a lot to unpack with that. I have lots of questions. Yeah. So you said that you after the book was published, you started doing workshops and speaking engagements. How did that start? And, if I was, to take a workshop with you, what would I expect from that?
Yeah. So the first year that the book came out, and I knew nothing, by the way, about publishing, about books, about it. I mean, I wasn't in the author-writer space at that point at all. And I started doing what I now in hindsight would say was sort of traditional book marketing. I did some book tour. I mean, I went on a little mini tour, and it really, what honestly was COVID. So we had been home a week. The kids were back home from college. We're all in our house in California. It's tight quarters. And I had the fortune in the year before, and as the book was getting out, of meeting all kinds of fabulous people in the Holoverse, as my husband calls it, which I think is beautiful.
Holoverse.
Right?
That's where the Challah Monster lives, in the Holoverse.
Yeah, exactly. And a friend of mine reached out from Atlanta and said to me, you should teach a virtual class. We're all home. Maybe we'll be home a couple of weeks. Little did we know. And my kids said, Mom, you have a laptop, get a ring light. You have a kitchen studio. There you go. And so I did. I started that Friday, a week or two in quarantine, offering challah workshops. And what we do in a workshop is still pretty similar to what I did then. I mean, it's just, it's evolved for sure. But essentially, to answer your question, what you expect at one of my workshops, what we do is we make dough together. And in the hour that we're together, I talk the whole time. And I'm talking about, while we're getting our hands in the bowls of dough, and while we're together as a group, having this tactile experience with this ancient Jewish ritual, I talk about the importance of a ritual. I talk about a tactile experience. I talk about being present. I talk about having a way to manage your stress. This is mine. You can pick whatever you'd like, but why that actually matters to our health. Because again, I'm coming at this as a physician. And when we're done, we have a bowl of dough. I like to think of it as a bit like a television show. I bring out another bowl of dough that I've made so I can demonstrate braiding and baking and talk about that. But people go home with a bowl of dough that then they can braid and bake at home. Sometimes I do a longer workshop depending on the organization, and we do actually do some programming while the dough rises, and then we come back and braid it. People go home with a loaf. But you don't go home with finished baked bread in general. I have done this at certain facilities where we actually do longer workshops where we do bake it. But the basic workshop, the one that I do all the time, and I've done 100 of these, is we make dough together and have this experience, which I find really empowering. And what's been particularly gratifying, Nicole, since a year ago, since October 7, is that I not only am working with Jewish groups, but I'm working with all kinds of groups. I work with churches. I've worked with a law firm. I worked with corporations. I worked with a lot of schools and medical schools and universities. And what's so powerful and impactful for me is to build bridges and to work with people of different faiths and different backgrounds and come together, because I think that's how we're going to move forward and have hope.
I love all of that. I love all of that. One of the things you'd mentioned about is the benefits of meaningful rituals. And I feel like I'm not baking challah because no one wants to eat any challah I make or braid, because I've made challah before. I've made challah before and I cannot braid it to save the life of me. So it's a whole mess. Like, I've had instructors rebraid for me. So there's that. But I have found other things in my life that have become meaningful Jewish rituals, which I think are very helpful. But what do you think are the health benefits of, because you say you're coming from this as a physician, the health benefits of meaningful rituals, whether it's baking challah or if you're not Jewish doing something else or going to synagogue on Fridays or whatever that is. What are the health benefits of that?
Yes. So I think it helps us feel connected, and it helps give us purpose. And I find that is really important for our mental health. And there's a connection between the mind and the body. I mean, when I actually went to medical school, which was 30 years ago, there was the body. And we learned a lot about, Western medicine and the body. We didn't necessarily talk so much about the connection between the mind and the body. Mm-hmm. I've come to really appreciate alternative and complementary medicine together with Western medicine. I think that they work very, very well together. And having a sense of belonging and community and ways to manage your stress significantly impact your health. And now we have actually data and research that support that. So when you have a meaningful ritual, so for example, me making challah, when I stop and I make challah on Fridays and I take a deep breath and I am there and present at the kitchen counter, I'm having an impact literally on my body. And I'm calming down and being present. That's great for so many. It's great for my heart. It's great for my mind. It's great for my mood. It doesn't get any better than that.
So you mentioned you'd never baked challah before you started. So no. What did you...
It's better now. Practice.
Practice does make perfect. What if someone, got your book, was interested in doing this specific meaningful ritual to kind of unwind and center themselves, how would they start? Never baked before. What would be your advice to them?
To get the 6 ingredients in a bowl and put them on the kitchen counter. It's really just that simple. The lovely thing about this particular ritual, we do it every week. It doesn't matter. One week it's great, one week it's not great. Who cares? I actually believe that perfect is the enemy of the good. And it's just the fact that you're engaging in it. So you just start. And some weeks even now, like I made a lot of challah last week. We were back in Ohio for Rosh Hashanah. And I made a lot of challah, which was great fun. Some of it was sublime. I'll just pat myself on the back. And there was a batch I made that just wasn't, Nicole. I felt so awful. Everyone thought it was fine. No one said anything, but I was like, yuck, this is not my standard. I don't know what happened. I don't know. It was the same ingredients. Sometimes that's just life. So how do you do it? You just start. Just get out the ingredients, put them on the kitchen counter, take a deep breath.
One step at a time. So you mentioned not good and good challah. And what, in your opinion, what makes a challah good or not good?
Oh,
other than it's being properly baked fully.
No, I know it's so subjective, but I want the dough to have a certain feeling, a je ne sais quoi. I can't exactly explain it, but when you feel it and it's good, you know. And it actually took me a while. The first year or so that I made challah, I was terrified and I didn't alter the recipe one iota. Abby had sent me the recipe. I copied it exactly. Didn't change anything. And it didn't always work though. And I finally realized after about a year, oh, I could adapt, I could modify, I could play with it. And I have found that when I hold back a little of the flour and then see what the dough needs. And one of the big lessons I learned is that you can always add more, but you can't always take out. I mean, obviously the whole point is that's good. That's a life lesson. And once I started doing that, so I that is probably the biggest factor now when I make challah. I play with the amount of dough, and sometimes it changes. I mean, you're familiar with Southern California. So 2 years ago, we had horrible wildfires that were close enough to where I live that the air was definitely wonky. And it happened to be on a Friday. And the dough, as a result, was crazy. Like I added so much more flour to compensate. Some of the workshops that I've done, I've had participants who are in high altitude and they've had to modify for example, that's another classic example that I can give you right off the bat. But I think actually I was in Ohio last week, and the air is different and the water is different than it is here. And I think that's also what happened. I don't know.
That's what scares me about baking. I'm like a D-level cook at best. My husband's it's the truth. My I can make like 3 things, and one of them is like a pre-marinated chicken from Trader Joe's. I'm not a good cook. I took cooking in high school and I was the dishwasher. That's the big joke. So my husband's the cook, and he just has this really great way of like you said, playing with things.
Yeah.
But baking is, I think, scary to him, though our kitchen is bigger now. So I think we're getting a KitchenAid, and my friend who's like a real baker was like, well, I'll obviously like you need to start baking. But I think that's one of the things that scares him, and definitely me, about baking is the change with dough and, like the air and the water, like all of that's one of the reasons that New York bagels are so good, is the water. So if you are,
so good.
It's the water and the pizza, and it's the sourdough in San Francisco. Same thing. It has to do with the water. So with baking, there's much more that goes into it. So I really like how you've compared it to life, how there's challenges. It's going to be different, but you just have to do it. And before I talked to you, who knew baking challah was so deep and philosophical?
It's very deep. I have to tell you, there's so many lessons that come out of this incredible bread.
It's also a mitzvah for women. We're supposed to bake challah, which my husband jokes with me. He's like, "You're not fulfilling your mitzvah." I was like, "I'm doing a mitzvah by not baking challah." But I feel like maybe I should try, and maybe I'll keep my husband on board in case I need like an expert. So you bake a lot of challah.
I do.
So and you talked about how you become more observant. So with all this challah, what does Shabbat look like at your house? Do you have a lot of people over? Is it more of a personal family experience? Is it sometimes just you and your husband? If you say your kids are in college. So what does that look like, or does it really vary?
It varies, and we have Shabbat now in our life, which is such a beautiful thing. So we did have a lot of challah, and when the kids were little, it became a very easy way to have their friends over. And it almost got to the point where I wasn't that intentional about it, because the kids were here and their friends came, and I didn't really think about it. Now that they're not here, we've actually been very intentional about it, because it's so easy to just not have Shabbat. Mm-hmm. I don't live in the community, so to speak. So it's not, everyone around me isn't.
There's no Shabbat siren.
No. So we, several times a month, we have people over, and I love that. And sometimes it really is just my husband and I. And then we joke, because our favorite meal on Friday nights is to just light the candles, say the blessing, have a really good glass of wine, and devour the challah. Unfortunately, we can't do that every week. That would not be a good idea. But we do have Shabbat every week, and usually it's with other people, which is very meaningful for both of us at this point.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things. We don't have people over very often because limited space, but I
Yeah.
think it's one of the things I do like about Shabbat is that when it is with a bunch of people, it becomes a real communal experience.
Right. Yeah. And just a beautiful anchor to the end and beginning of the week. Like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot now. I really like that.
Yeah, we try at least to light candles and do some grape juice and challah at the very
Yeah.
least if we're not doing something better, because my
Yeah.
daughter will ask for grape juice and challah. So I don't know if it's a food driven thing for her, but she's already kind of, I think, buying into the idea of this is what we do every Friday, which I
Oh,
like.
that's beautiful. Yes.
So you had mentioned October 7th and how things have changed, at least from your workshops in challah making. Can you kind of delve into that a little bit more, or how things have changed personally for you since October 7th? I think everybody who, feels affected by what happened can say that their life changed, at least in some way.
Oh, Nicole, I feel like it was the before and the after. I was just and continue to be devastated. Really, really horrible. So, how's our life changed? We now, on Shabbat, every Friday, we light 3 candles because we always only lit 2. And now we light a 3rd for the hostages. We started that immediately. For a while, we were saying extra prayers also on Friday night. I always now, actually, let me backtrack. So one of the lovely things I do when I make challah, which I've been doing for years, that I was taught actually when I got to make challah in Israel, which was so cool. But anyway, I learned about making challah in the merit of somebody or something and bringing more intention to the experience. So since October 7, one of the, so at the beginning when I start to make challah, I always think about every week, in whose merit am I going to make this batch? And I always now add in the hostages. And it brings me a little solace, and I actually do believe in the power of prayer. So I think it helps. Interestingly for me, since that time, I have felt more connected to my community, and that has been a silver lining to all of this, and a really lovely silver lining. And then I had an opportunity this summer. I don't know if you know about this book yet. It just came out, but I had an opportunity to participate in an anthology that was released as an ebook and an audiobook on October 1st called On Being Jewish Now. Mm-hmm. And the paperback version is coming out November 1st. And there are 75 authors and advocates who have written about, we all wrote a short essay about anything post October 7, and the book is divided into all kinds of categories. Some are joyous, and some are sad, and everything in between. Excuse me. And to be involved in experiences like that has also really been impactful for me.
That was another question I had. So how did you get involved with that, and what did you write about?
So Zibby Owens, who's the editor of the book and has a publishing arm as part of her media company, published the book. I was fortunate to meet her actually right when Braided came out. She had just started her podcast. This was the fall of 2018, and I think she started in the summer of 2018, so brand new. And I was a guest on her podcast, which was super fun. And we actually made challah together here in LA. And then I've done a couple events with her over the years since then. So she reached out in July to ask if I would, I think it was July, to ask if I would be able to do this. And I was like, of course. I mean, this is just a beautiful, beautiful thing to have come into being. I'm really thrilled about it. And I wrote about Challah, of course. But what I wrote about was coming together as community. So I mentioned a bit before how I make challah with all different types of people, and particularly I'm leaning into that in a big way post October 7. So I wrote about what the ritual means to me, but then also I highlighted one of the experiences that I've had during the year. These are short essays, by the way. They're all, under 1,000 words. So
I just submitted something that they wanted 1,000 words, and I couldn't get. It was like right under 2,000. I couldn't figure out how to do that.
Yeah,
it's so
really,
short.
Short is actually, Nicole, I think it's harder.
It is.
You
All
have
my
to
school
edit
papers are
and edit.
very long. I hate when they give, like, if I'm writing a paper, it's going to be longer than you're going to ask for, and there's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah. Our directive was 500 to 1,000 words.
Oh my, that's
and
it's like one single thought.
Yeah, they're short. They're short. It's tough, but there's something really, really powerful about this book, and definitely check it out. Not only as a book when it comes out in November, but now the audiobook is really great because most of us read our own pieces.
Oh, that's nice that you were able to do it yourself.
Yeah, so it's lovely to hear everybody speaking, and that's fun. And just I've never actually heard that before, or I haven't read a book like that where all the contributors actually recorded their own, which is neat, which is really neat.
We got dogs in the background.
I'm sure you're going to hear ours at some point. I was worried about that, but now I'm less worried.
No. We are a pro dog house. Do you have plans to write another book? I mean, it'd be a lot of, you're a writer now. Are you going to stop at just one and that just be your kind of opus?
I don't know. No, it's a great question. I have been working on something off and on actually for a couple years. I've shelved a few. I've got one going now, about halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I really enjoy writing. I didn't know that about myself. The things we learn, I do enjoy it. And what I really enjoy are other people's stories and sharing other people's stories. So there might be another book in me, which would be super fun. We'll see. And I'm really enjoying the workshops. So that will continue for now.
So speaking about the workshops, I wanted to ask how if I wanted to join a workshop, how would I find out what events you're going to be doing? Or if I wanted to book an event from my organization, how would I go about that?
So at the moment, I am no longer doing them just me, myself, and I.
Okay.
Meaning that I used to just put a link up on, in my newsletter on my website and say, next Friday I'm doing this at this time. But now I'm working with organizations, institutions, whomever. So to participate in a workshop at this point, it's through, I fill in the blank organization, your synagogue, your school, your whatever, your office, your whomever. And they bring me in and it's great. I work, all over the place. And I've even now gone out of the country to do it, which is fun. So how do you do that? You reach out to me. So you reach out to me either through my website, which is just my name, BethRicanatiMD.com, or you find me on Instagram or Facebook. And also my name on Instagram, Beth Ricanati MD. And we work together and set it up, which is really fun.
I know. Now I want to eat challah, which is,
well, please, exactly,
which is just an always thing that I want to do. I just want to always eat challah.
It's the only bread now I like to eat, quite frankly.
So we were doing like a play thing with my daughter, and there was like an instructor, and they pulled up a picture of bread, and they asked her what it was, and she went challah. So she just thinks all bread is challah now. So that's where we're at my house, which is fair.
You have succeeded.
My job as a Jewish mother is done.
It's done.
So these next questions are short form questions done in the style of the Actor Studio. You can do like a quick answer. So what is your favorite Yiddish word?
Oh, that's a good one. Let's say Mishigas.
I love that as well. What about your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, Passover, hands down. Which I know there's no challah, but I love to. We host Seder every year, and that's my favorite thing. I love Seder. I guess
yeah, I did.
I know,
but not the no challah part.
No.
But it's only a week. So, if you were to have a bat mitzvah today and have a big blowout party, what would the theme be?
Oh my goodness! Well, we'd have to do something around challah because it really does rule my life. So, something around challah.
Okay. What profession other than your own would you want to attempt?
Nicole, I like what I do. I don't know right now if I would attempt something else. I mean, when I was younger, I had a list a mile long of things I wanted to do and be. But I don't regret not doing them.
If heaven is real and God is there to welcome you, what would you like to hear him say?
You did good. You did good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Beth. It has been a pleasure. And hopefully all of you are going to go either bake or grab some challah, or even better, book a workshop. So this has been Shebrew in the City, and I am Nicole Kelly.